I'm Rida Hussain, and in today's case in point, we're going to talk about India's brutal military operation and attack, which took place last night and attacked various areas, including Bahawalpur, Muridke, and various other areas. And India has attempted to justify its military operation by saying that Pakistan was involved in the Pahalgam attack. And it's important to reiterate that to date, India has not provided any evidence of Pakistan's involvement. In fact, it was Pakistan that was calling for an independent investigation, and various members of the Pakistan government have repeatedly called for an independent investigation into the attack of Pahalgam. And it is India that is resisting such an investigation and that has to date not provided any evidence and still continues to make this link. So, for all practical purposes, India has launched an unprovoked attack on Pakistan. And under the UN Charter, and in particular Article 2, subsection 4 of the UN Charter, it prohibits and refrains states from attacking the territorial integrity of another state or using force against the territorial integrity and political independence of another state, which is what we saw India do. Innocent civilians have been killed, and as per the latest reports, 26 Pakistanis have been killed in these attacks. And even the Geneva Convention protects civilians from in armed conflict and gives protection to civilians. And the purpose of India's attack, in some respect, appears to be to spread terror among the civilian population. And they've also attacked places of worship, they've attacked mosques. And the narrative that India is currently presenting is that they are attacking terrorists and they were terrorists hiding in these places, and they've called mosques terror camps. And this is the same language that we've seen Israel also adopt when they bomb hospitals and schools. They say that Hamas is hiding in hospitals and they're attacking terrorists in hospitals and schools. And actually, what they end up doing is they end up bombing hundreds of children and women. So India is adopting the language of war. India is adopting the same language that we've seen Israel adopt over the course of the last few years. And even sensible people in India and liberals in India are also beating these war drums and are not calling for restraint. So, Aisha, what are your thoughts on the attack last night? First of all, if I can ask you in terms of what do you think the legality, what India's done, and the justification, because again, they're using the language of international law to justify what they've done. They're saying we've done this in accordance with international law. So if I could have your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, so after the Pahalgam attack, we knew that there would be a military operation launched by India, and we knew that it would be in some ways of greater magnitude than what we saw in 2019. And so in terms of the beating the drums and the rhetoric that was coming out of Indian politicians, and especially out of Modi, we did expect something of the gravity and scale that we saw last night. Under international law, India's actions last night were completely unlawful. Let's look first at the law relating to the use of force. Now, again, there was no evidence, and US congressmen have also come out and said there was no strong evidence linking Pakistan to the cross-border terrorist attack, which took place in Kashmir, and yet they claim that it is a cross-border terrorist attack in the sense of that Pakistan was involved in that. This, under international law, if you are going to use force in self-defense, it has to be attributable to a state and it has to be necessary and proportionate. On all three counts, India's actions violate the law relating to the use of force and violate the UN Charter in this. They could not attribute those actions to Pakistan. Under the Nicaragua case, the International Court of Justice has said that the test for attribution for the purposes of self-defense is incredibly high. It requires that a state send or have substantial involvement therein in terms of that group conducting the armed attack. So attribution, there was no attribution. Secondly, let's come to necessity. This was a completely unnecessary attack. This was not a measure of last resort, which is what self-defense is supposed to be. As you mentioned, Pakistan has said, we will work hand in hand. We will work with the international community. We will have an independent investigation. Let's get to the bottom of this. We are open. We were talking peace all the way up until last night, right? So this was completely unnecessary. And it was also completely disproportionate because it was also completely unnecessary and it was disproportionate to what happened in Pahalgam. Now let's come to the laws of war. This is another regime of law which applies when there are conduct of hostilities. Now we know that India has also directly targeted civilian sites. It has targeted mosques, it has targeted homes, and it has even targeted on the Neelam River, it has targeted hydroelectric power plants. So you are directly targeting civilian sites. Again, you were alleging that this is a military objective in the sense of that these are terrorist hideouts. No evidence being provided for that. So this is a clear violation of international law, and Pakistan has the right to self-defense.
And in terms of the right to self-defense, what we're hearing from both sides of the border is a reference to Article 51 of the UN Charter. And as I understand it, for that article to engage, your use of force has to be in response to an attack. So when India is invoking Article 51, I really don't understand how they can say it's self-defense because A, they're using force as a means of punishment. And to use force to punish individuals and to punish civilians is unlawful and it's not self-defense. And you can't launch an attack under the guise of self-defense. You're launching an attack on another state and you're giving it the cover by saying, oh, actually, we're defending ourselves. So I don't understand how India has invoked Article 51. But we've also heard from the members of the Pakistan government and a press release, they've also referred to Article 51 of the UN Charter. And they've said that Pakistan has been subject to an armed attack. India has not denied it. India has admitted that it has attacked Pakistan. It can give it whatever cover it wants, but India has accepted that it has attacked Pakistan. So Pakistan has been subject to an armed attack. So Pakistan has also made reference to Article 51 of the UN Charter. So what are your thoughts on Pakistan now referring to this particular article and saying we reserve the right to defend ourselves against Indian aggression and what India has done?
So in terms of Article 51, it says that nothing in this provision prevents the inherent right of a state to respond to any armed attack committed against it. Now, India is alleging that it has been the victim of an armed attack and that armed attack allows it to use force in self-defense against Pakistani territory. And so the wording of that is very interesting to look at because it's based on a very controversial doctrine in international law, which is not accepted, called the unable and unwilling doctrine, which says that you can go into another state and target non-state actors, and that is why India has said we did not target Pakistani military installations, which undercuts their other claim that Pakistan is linked to this group, because then if it was, you would have the right to target Pakistani military installations, but you acknowledge you don't have that right, and you're going against this non-state actor under this very controversial doctrine in international law, which is not accepted under Article 51. So, and they've also used the language of preemptive strikes, that they think that there could be other strikes. The strike that happened in Pahalgam stopped in Pahalgam, and unless India shows that there is evidence of further strikes, it cannot allege preemption. Now, Pakistan has been victim of an armed attack. The reason India is saying that there is self-defense is because there is no self-defense to self-defense. But we know that India's claim to self-defense is completely unsubstantiated. What India has done is an act of aggression. They have committed an armed attack against Pakistan, and to that, we have the right to self-defense, we have the right to respond to the armed attack, and we have the right to deter future attacks from the aggressor.
And in terms of the very troubling thing that we've seen, again, over the course of the last few years, is that states are now resisting any independent adjudication and any independent forum and are acting as judge, jury, and executioner all by themselves. From the outset, India has resisted, as we said, any investigation into what went down in Pahalgam. They unilaterally decided that this was done by Pakistan without any evidence and decided the very next day what action they were going to take in terms of the Indus Water Treaty. And now they've also undertaken a military attack without any independent investigation. And even though the world was urging restraint, and they did not subject themselves to any independent forum. So this is again a crumbling of the international law and of what we used to call the rules-based order, that no state is respecting it and they're just taking decisions unilaterally without any fear of consequences. And this impunity is something which is very dangerous for the world at large, and even in terms of the international community now responding to India's attack, which was entirely unprovoked. I think that there needs to be a strong message from the international community as well, because the impunity with which Israel has been acting and India has now acted, and both states seem to have found an alliance with each other. And even if you look on social media, you see India sort of supporting Israel, and Israel is now supporting India. So they formed an alliance with each other. They're not afraid of the consequences. They're not afraid of any independent forum ruling against them, because as we've seen in the case of Israel, they just won't comply. And they'll accuse that organization of having terrorists. And, even we have members of the Israeli government saying that, well, even the UN is Hamas. So when this is the kind of response that you have, what do you see in the future?
Well, I think that India is building on a narrative which is quite dated and quite old now. So this anti-terrorism narrative, which gained steam after 9/11, now we see that India has gone so far as to target what it calls terrorists or separatists, it seeks separatists in Canada. So it's gone to that extent, which it thinks that it can do whatever it wants in violation of international law. And I think that Pakistan, as a sovereign state, and I think that this is the right of sovereignty, this is the prerogative that Pakistan holds, which is the right to go against India in self-defense, in response to an armed attack, in a way that is necessary and proportionate. So while a state can act like that, it can act on its own, it has to do so in conformity with international law. And we can see that India is trying to use this terrorism narrative. It's not really gaining much muster internationally. People are just like, well, where is the evidence? You don't have any evidence to prove this. And so it is trying to fall back on this very dated narrative, which is just not working anymore. And it's quite interesting to see also that there is a crisis in the Indian Air Force itself. So a month ago, Sushant Singh was on Karan Thappar's show talking about how there was a crisis in the Indian Air Force, in the sense that their newest jets were actually 10 years old. And the response that we've seen from Pakistan, which is the downing of at least 3 and perhaps up to 5 Indian jets, means that Pakistan, as a sovereign state, does have the right to respond, and we have a strong military which can do that response. And as long as we do it in a necessary way and a proportionate way, which is to deter future threats and to respond to the armed attack that we have currently suffered, we are acting as a responsible state in line with international law, while India is definitely